Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of G News. In this update, we'll just quickly review the week. And at the beginning of the week, you may recall the news that Christopher Luxon had suddenly, amazingly, coincidentally, been struck down with a virus and was unable to face media or any kind of scrutiny all of a sudden.
To see you, Mike. I know you're a germaphobe, and I would have been here with a hazmat on Monday, and you wouldn't have liked it. So I'm here on Thursday.
And this coincided with the news that there was a threshold that had been described in an internal police memo back in March 2025 that said it was actually perfectly okay for anyone to walk into a supermarket and steal $499 worth of any kind of shoplifted goods under this government. No problem, just walk on out with all those goods. So at the time that memo came out a few months ago, Richard Chambers did not speak up. Christopher Luxon was perfectly cool with it. Mark Mitchell didn't report anything unusual. But then the media got a hold of this, and suddenly Christopher Luxon had a virus and he couldn't talk to anyone. Suddenly he was off limits, and the Prime Minister was going to be away for an entire week. It was going to take a week to get this story straight. Well, you can imagine the shock and the horror on Kerry Woodham's face over at News Talk ZB because it just wasn't good enough.
Because basically that is saying I can walk out of my local supermarket with $499 worth of goods in my trolley if I've got the gall to do it.
Yes, and let me be clear that is not the case. So there will be a police response.
So as you can see, Mark Mitchell really didn't have anything coherent to say, and there was a kind of a lag as the message entered through his brain and passed into some kind of processing that was quite slow, and then it had to come all the way back and out of his mouth.
In these jobs.
Well, what's the directive then?
Well, that's an internal memo, and that is operational for police, and I think police have got more to say on that, and will be clarifying it themselves. But my expectation as the police minister has been very clear that yes, I don't interfere with their prioritisation. I don't interfere with how they prioritise deployment to jobs. But the expectation is that every crime that is committed, if they have resources available, there will be a response.
And Mitchell had been umming and ahhing about a police response and how there will be, which was just evidence that the government were panicking because they'd been all goofing off and they had no idea what was really going on, including Police Commissioner Chambers, who suddenly had to make up something that sounded like the expectation tree.
I was very disappointed to learn of a memo that went out internally back in March this year talking about thresholds, because the content of that memo is inconsistent with my expectations.
The expectation tree is when the person at the top of the tree says, look, shit, it's not my fault, I'm not accountable for anything, and they shit on the person in the lower branch, and the shit lands on the head of the person below them, which is Mark Mitchell, and he goes, oh shit, well, it's not my fault. I have expectations, and I'm sure the police operationally will deal with this, and they'll come back with a response. And so they shit on the police commissioner, and the police commissioner goes, shit, I didn't pay attention, I have no idea what's going on. Shoplifting's happening in this country, up to $499 free shoplifting, come and get it, everybody. So this is my expectation. It hasn't been met. And, all these excuses and stories come out after the fact when they're caught out red-handed, being totally incompetent. So the expectation tree is all about different levels of shit that trickles down until at the bottom of the tree, you probably end up with some kind of constable who's covered in shit and might lose his job while everyone else above him goes scot-free, making excuses about their expectations not being met. So we saw all that at the beginning of the week, and that meant that Luxon couldn't actually face the media. He was chattering away in fear that the one thing that he had said that he was going to do after fixing the economy and turning around the ship, turning that corner in an endless circle that turned into a spiral as we all go down the drain, was that he was going to restore law and order, and he was going to be tough, and he wasn't going to be soft on crime. But we've never seen any government in the history of New Zealand being so soft on crime that you can just walk into a shop and for $499 worth, it's all yours. Just, steal it. I mean, this is Paul Goldsmith and Mark Mitchell and Christopher Luxon, and they're not just sort of quoting fake figures about violent crime off the internet now. They're just saying, look, we've been caught, so the Prime Minister's sick for a while, and now we actually have to just get the police commissioner to correct the record and say that that internal memo was a mistake that flew past his nose and he didn't blink, he didn't say anything at the time, but now he's saying, well, no, I really regret the fact that I am sleeping on the job, Mr. Chambers. So and later on in the week when Mr. Luxon was clear and the blame had all been shifted onto somebody else, he appeared on the Mike Hosking show to talk about the great success that the government had had by stealing credit off the Reserve Bank, who had lowered the OCR. And because there's really only the housing market and with a bit of manufacturing and a few other sectors tacked onto it in New Zealand, Christopher Luxon was all upbeat about this incredible plan of his that was to get the Reserve Bank and its independent monetary policy to bring inflation down so mortgage rates could fall and that people would start buying more houses. And potentially, if we got rid of Winston Peters, we could sell a lot more houses to foreign buyers and just sell New Zealand up. And that was basically most of the plan that Christopher Luxon had. Because remember, at the beginning of the year, after the shocking Haifu result showed that Nikki Noboats was presiding over the deepest deficit, the biggest recession since Ruth Richardson in 1991, that Christopher Luxon had pretended that he was going for growth using a Liz Truss strategy that had failed in the UK. So they applied it here, saying growth, 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 trickle-down growth. It'll all just trickle down into all these different sectors. But here's what Mike Hosking reacted to when we heard that Christopher Luxon was carrying on with this whole investment stuff. There was no investment at all in the big investment summit. There was trillions of dollars in the room and none of them opened their wallets. And we haven't seen anything successful from Luxon. No one believes a word he says anymore, not even News Talk ZB. So here's Mike listening to Luxon and disagreeing with him about just about everything.
Mentality when you get inflation down at 2.2 or 2.5%, under the 3%. That we're expecting prices to stabilise across the system.
But
you're seeing that in the macro. Well, you're seeing that in the macro inflation numbers, right?
Are you?
Well, you are, because they're down at 2.5, not 7.3.
Well, they're trending up towards 2.7, towards the top end of the band. That's the problem. My great concern is that we're not getting the growth to drive inflation. If we had inflation from growth, fantastic.
So as you can see, Luxon was upbeat about inflation being brought down by the Reserve Bank and the OCR, but saying that our plan, National's plan, is working, which is to steal credit from the Reserve Bank. And the growth figures are insipid, as we saw on Q&A.
Yeah. Go downtown Auckland, downtown Wellington.
Still tough.
It's not happening.
No, I agree with you. I agree. That's what I'm saying to you. We've been through a tough time. We are turning the corner because at least you've got change happening. You've got some growth happening in different parts of the sector. I think there's starting to be some growth in manufacturing and services, which is good.
Well, there's no growth. No, you can't. Don't mislead us. There's growth in manufacturing.
Yep.
Multi-month growth in manufacturing. There's no growth in services, and there hasn't been for ages.
Growth is really not there in any sustainable way. There's a couple of sectors that have had a marginal amount of growth, but really growth is not the solution. And we're seeing changes being made this week in Parliament where growth and the myth that it's going to trickle down to people's back pockets carries on from National as they lie and deceive to the New Zealand public.
Changing the rules around wellbeing budgeting. Now, we had a good stand-up comedy routine over there. Great stand-up comedy. Chris Bishop is good at that. What we didn't have is a sensible analysis of that thinking behind the wellbeing budget. We all know that government sets fiscal policy, but fiscal policy has an impact on people's lives. We need to measure not just where money goes in and money goes out, what gets spent on particular programs and what doesn't, but we actually need to try to understand how it affects people's lives.
And you've got inflation going up and Christian Hawkesby being neutral and not tying his hands to future OCR decisions in uncertain times, something that really shocked the brain out of Mike Hosking, because, you've got to have complete certainty in an environment where there is no certainty if you're Mike Hosking.
And go, Interest rate cuts, fantastic money flowing into the economy.
Yep.
If there are no more interest rates cuts, which is what I got from Hawkesby yesterday because he's neutral on it, then what are you going to say?
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't take that as there's no more cuts coming.
He said he's
how I
neutral.
read
He
about
says
it.
neutral. You wouldn't have a clue.
Yeah.
And he had Luxon on about this, and they basically just sounded like a couple of arguing fools. Anyway, further on into the week, we also remember that the Te Pāti Māori party have been banned from taking part in the budget debate, and this is because Christopher Bishop moved that we delay the debate, and so we could interfere with democracy and kind of make the government look more like a tin pot dictatorship. So here's Judith Collins and her pretty racist overreach and unprecedented ignoring of standing orders as she lashed out like some kind of plantation owner in the southern United States in the cotton fields against Te Pāti Māori. Listen to Collins here and her completely over-the-top punishments for Hana, for Debs, and for Rawiti Waititi.
Judith Collins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I move that Hana Rafiti Maipi Clark be suspended from the House for 7 days for acting in a manner that could have the effect of intimidating a member of the House in the discharge of their duty, and that Debbie Ngarewa Packer be severely censured by the House and suspended from the service of the House for 21 days for acting in a manner that could have the effect of intimidating a member of the House in the discharge of their duty, and that Rawiri Waititi be severely censured by the House and suspended from the service of the House for 21 days for acting in a manner that could have the effect of intimidating a member of the House in the discharge of their duty.
Well, Chris Hipkins wasn't taking any of that shit, so he came back and he said the following.
We've had members undertaking fist fights in the lobbies, and they were not suspended at all. We've had members driving tractors and Land Rovers up the front steps of Parliament, and they were not sanctioned. We have had a recent case where a member left their chair, walked to the other side of the House, stood over a member, thumped the table, and they were not sanctioned by the House. We've had a recent instance in this term of Parliament where a member was prevented from leaving a select committee because another member was standing over them, and they were not sanctioned by this House. And yet, Mr Speaker, we seem to have gone from a situation where members were not sanctioned to one where a 21-day sanction, the harshest by a factor of 7, is being applied to these members. It is disproportionate.
And then Chris Hipkins went even further. After establishing that there was no precedence for this kind of carry-on from Judith Collins and the White Privileges Committee, and how privileged they all were as they tried to create a precedent for the future that would undermine New Zealand's democracy.
Mr Speaker, I was absolutely shocked to learn that a member of the Privileges Committee asked about the committee's supposed power to imprison a member of the House. That happens in tin pot dictatorships and banana republics. No member of this House should be inquiring about whether they can imprison a member of their opposition.
As I previously mentioned, some critics of G News said that Chris Hipkins never did say anything about a dictatorship, but there it was, as you all heard for yourself, in the Hansard. He did say that in the speech, and that we shouldn't be imprisoning people in the opposition who might disagree with us in a democracy. That's the kind of stuff that happens in a tin pot dictatorship and a banana republic. If you travel overseas and you go to a hotel and you look up New Zealand Parliament, what will you find? You will find Hana and the Haka. The whole world knows about it. It's been a great promotion for the Haka and for New Zealand, that we've stood up and claimed that the rules should change, that we should be more inclusive, that we should honour the Treaty of Waitangi, that we should have rules that reflect the population. 1 million people identify as Māori, and despite what some national new rookie MPs might say, most Māori do not actually support the ACT Party or the National Party. Most support Labour or the Greens or Te Pāti Māori. So the argument that if you can find one that disagrees, then you can't say that the majority think a certain way is wrong. And I'd just like to say that even if you're the Minister of the South Island, you're not doing anything or delivering anything for South Islanders, are you? So there's a whole lot of hype in the press about people who have become MPs under this national government, but they don't deliver anything. They're not particularly useful. They're stuck in a rut. They have nothing new or inspiring to tell us. But what we should be doing is being more inclusive, honour the treaty, don't actually depart from the rules like Judith Collins, don't bring skin into it, don't bring some kind of racism into this, don't just reject all of the rules of Parliament yourself when you are trying to prosecute somebody else for breaking the rules. In other news that's probably not quite so pressing, yes, you've got a whole lot of squabble going on right now about David Seymour becoming the Deputy Prime Minister, which is just insanity, isn't it? I mean, what kind of day have we reached in New Zealand? We've really reached the low point of New Zealand history that David Seymour could possibly be the Deputy Prime Minister of this country as he lashes out with an open mouth without any kind of thought for what he's doing, and is basically repeatedly caught out. Look at the school lunches. There were larvae and bugs and all sorts of terrible things happening in school lunches after they burnt children with them, after they imported them from Australia. And this kind of carry on in evidence week after week after week, month after month by Seymour and his school lunches and his failed charter schools and the treaty principles bill that cost us all millions and wasted 6 months of parliamentary time carries on, and this guy is rewarded by Christopher Luxon because he's merit-based, and in anything that's like a catastrophe gets a big tick, because ultimately right down at the bottom of the merit-based system is, does it serve Christopher Luxon's desperation to hold on to power? So yes, that's what we're seeing here in New Zealand as per usual on a Friday. In other news in the blogosphere, I guess you'd call it that, or the podcast sphere, Bernard Hickey made it clear last night on The Hoon that he was off for a month around Europe with his wife, and good on them for going around Europe and taking a month off after the budget. But one of the valuable things that Bernard had to say to us all was that he disagreed with Matthew Hooton, who had been claiming that New Zealand was a very, very poor country. And Bernard said that, no, New Zealand's actually very rich when you think about all of the assets that we own, that the government also owns, including all of the houses that we own in this country, which aren't picking up and leaving the country anytime soon. They're maintaining their value. The value is basically guaranteed by the government in the way that it values the houses and the material and the infrastructure that we've got. We've got a growing population. We've got heaps of natural resources of our own. So there's all sorts of reasons to argue with Matthew Hooton, who was going down the old neoliberal myth that we need austerity, that we shouldn't borrow, we shouldn't invest in ourselves, we should just cry off like we're poor and give up. And that's what we're seeing from Nicola Willis, is a failure of ambition, as a catastrophizing over debt, of a removing by media and everyone else that supports Nicola Willis of any kind of argument about our net worth, our actual assets, and the counter-argument as they hold the truth behind their back and try to deceive us all into worrying about debt and being conservative and safe-minded and poor-minded, as we just don't invest in the future, leaving that investment deficit for somebody else to solve. Yes, and we've still got the promotion of Erica Stanford after about a year of openly defying the rules of Parliament over Gmail. She insisted that she would just flout the rules, and Christopher Luxon thought, well, that was very good, and just keep flouting the rules. You know, it's okay, it's Erica. Erica is a corporate golden girl, so the rules don't apply to Erica. And while the media actually beat this up, well, then along came Pay Equity, and Pay Equity put an end to the accountability of Erica Stanford, who lived to break the rules for another day and just say things that are crazy. For example, all of that fuss that came up about immigration and just absolutely racist comments towards all of the Indian community, and everyone that ever voted for National from India should be deeply concerned that they've got Erica just dismissing any of their claims for immigration, that it's racist, that she's making excuses, that she breaks rules and gets away with it when it comes to Gmail, and on and on and on. Totally unaccountable. A press that fawns over her, that admires her, that worships everything she says and is too afraid to bite her to actually hold her to account. So we've seen that kind of thing happen, and I really don't think that people on the North Shore should be voting for Erica Stanford anymore. I think that time has finished. We've seen enough. No more Erica, please. Let's do something better. Let's get people properly educated. Let's get people back to school. Stop serving them up those school lunches that Erica seems to agree with, but can't stop, is powerless to act. Just useless, really. Unable to be a proper Minister of Education, someone we can't trust, someone that behind the scenes is one other thing, and it's somebody else's fault. It's always somebody else's fault, isn't it, Erica? It's not your fault. You were just caught out and caught out again and again. And they just look the other way and they let you carry on. That's what I'm seeing. This wouldn't be a proper G News broadcast if it wasn't for a call to action to everybody to actually stand up and fight back against the Regulatory Standards Bill that David Seymour and his tiny little 8% party are foisting on all of our future legislation in order to make it advantageous to the greedy rich, the bitter rich at the very top, who already have more than enough and don't need, who want to make things worse for everybody at the bottom, and they want you to vote for more inequality. Wealth inequality is good, greed is good, and that's why the people at the top, they give hundreds of thousands of dollars of donations to keep the table tilted, to keep you down, to keep you suffering, to prevent your children from having a decent future in this country. And so the game is always to kind of be able to lie, to be able to steal, the pay equity from women, to make them work harder, to get them less, but while you ingratiate yourself. And I think that's basically what the whole Luxon gig is. It's Willis lying about things, about the ferries, and saying she's delivered when she hasn't. You've got Winston going out there and calling members of the public sunshine and demeaning them, and then telling the public that they look like bollocks. And if you actually speak up to Winston, then someone will come around to your employer and make sure that you go hungry, that your children are starving, that you won't be able to live properly. You'll have to go and get a job seeker benefit, because if you speak out and be yourself in this country, then that's wrong. Winston Peters is coming after you. There's going to be death threats against you. There's going to be so many retributions for having free speech under Winston Peters' iron fist, who hates the woke and he hates anyone that's a bit different. If you're non-binary, boy, you could actually be killed. You could be murdered by someone that supports New Zealand First. I mean, wow, we have actually come to this, and they still want your vote. They still want your family members to say, no, I actually think I'll vote for that guy that's intimidating people and suppressing free speech. And of course, the Atlas funded Free Speech Union, they're very selective about which free speech they want to promote and which free speech they want to shut down. So we're seeing this with New Zealand First, who have kind of acted as a blocker of the wholesale sale of every New Zealand asset by Christopher Luxon that he could possibly sell. And it's really annoyed people who believe in neoliberalism and that globalization and stitching up New Zealand so it doesn't have any autonomy and is basically just at the whim of banks and international corporates. So, that's the whole game, isn't it? Winston has served as a blocker, but he's also adopted Trumpism, and that's a goose step too far, and it's time for him to retire and leave the scene to people that are actually fresh and have something beyond Trumpism to offer. Speaking of Trumpism, we had the federal court decision that blocked all of the tariffs, including the 10% import tariff placed against New Zealand. So again, we're seeing this circus that Winston believes in, that he kowtows to, that he falls down and prays. We will not rock the boat of Trumpism, that we just fall into line, kind of a cowardly thing. Speaking of cowards, we've also got Eru Kapakingi challenging David Seymour to a charity boxing match, and like a coward that can't face charity and doing something good for a good cause. Seymour basically was so afraid that he said that that boxing was a childish activity, that Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Limited and all these other people, even Sir Bob Jones, were all just immature children who followed a sport that Seymour has no time for right now. But basically, Yellow Rivers were running down his leg, and there was no way he's getting in the ring with Eru Kapakingi after what Seymour had said about his mum in Parliament. I think it was just shocking that Jerry didn't pull him up, and that there was such a one-sided handling of the Speaker's role that people were just aghast. But they've become sort of immune because they've seen so much of the biasness, the bias in the Speaker's rulings, the declining of all of the democratic debates, and how basically National was riding roughshod over democracy here, the wealthy dominating everybody else, and all the reasonable scientific and skilled people are leaving the country. Luxon's blaming it on poor health as Simeon Brown tries to privatise health and make training of new doctors almost impossible. All the easy cases are going to the private sector, who are raking it in with insurance claims. Insurance premiums are then being driven up because, it's just become unaffordable. Healthcare is only going to be available and accessible to the very wealthy, and that's the future that people who vote for National really want for New Zealand. They want to destroy the public health system of New Zealand, and that's what they cast their vote to do. I don't think I'm exaggerating, because that is exactly what they're doing. They're just going to make it more and more difficult. There'll be more preventable deaths in New Zealand if you keep going down this path. And, we've seen that evidenced in medical journals over in the United States and in the Tory government in the UK. We just don't want that in New Zealand. We should prevent death. We should be looking after our people. They should be able to go to the doctor and afford those visits. Come on, stop voting for Simeon Brown. This is just wrong, immorally wrong. It's like Judith Collins, and the cotton fields, bringing all of that kind of old-fashioned racism in denial to New Zealand. It's like Winston presiding over people, abusing the public, abusing the press, just sounding off like a cannon that's got no accountability at all. There's just nothing to stop him. How much time does that man waste in Parliament every week with stupid, moronic questions and interruptions? And Jerry just keeps warning him. Eventually the guy got sent out, but Jesus, it took 18 months before Jerry would act because he's so bloody useless and one-sided. Anyway, I don't want to carry on in that fashion. I'd rather be happy. So I'll just leave it there today. Anyway, I think we've, in summary, seen Mark Mitchell exposed for being completely incompetent and out of touch. Richard Chambers not knowing what's going on until he is actually given a big wake-up that he needs to do something, because Christopher Luxon has to pretend he's sick, and then when he does show up to Mike Hosking, he gets it in the ear because he's just basically trying to bullshit everyone, and even Hosking can't stand that level of bullshit. Come on, Christopher Luxon, you're the worst Prime Minister New Zealand has ever seen. You should never have been given the role because you were rich, because you owned 7 houses, because you came from a corporate background. That entire idea that because you can temporarily run a business down doesn't mean you can run a country. So that's all I have to say today on G News. I hope you've enjoyed this little update of the week. There's been a lot more that happened, but that'll do for now. Catch you all again soon.